Well, good morning, brothers and sisters. This is Pastor Kevin O'Connor again from Oak Grove Baptist Church. And I wanted to get on here. This is like day 6 or something. Today I was supposed to be doing the Anglican confession on Scripture. But as I studied, I realized that the Methodists, United Methodists, and Global Methodists are directly quoting the Anglican 39 Articles of Religion. So there's no point in rehashing that. They have the same statement exactly word for word verbatim as the Protestants do, or as the Methodists do. Outside of they added the Apocrypha to a list of books that can be read, okay? Not that they are scripture, but that they can be read. Now, so since I did that and I didn't want to rehash the same thing that we already discussed, we're going to look at the Lutheran statement of faith on scripture. Now, this comes from the Formula of Concord. You can look this up for yourself. This is the Book of Concord.org. It's the epitome of Concord, the original home for the Book of Concord, which is the Lutheran Statement of Faith. Now, I want to preface this. They start where most Protestants start, and they're holding very much to sola scriptura, which is scripture alone being the rule of faith and practice. Now, as we begin this, it starts as a comprehensive summary, rule and norm, and it's starting with the scriptures. Comprehensive summary, rule, and norm according to which all dogmas should be judged, and the erroneous teachings, controversies that have occurred should be decided and explained in a Christian way. Number 1, we believe, teach, confess that the sole rule and standard according to which all dogma, together with all teachers, should be esteemed and judged are the prophetic and apostolic scriptures of the Old and New Testament alone. As is written in Psalm 119, 105, the word is a lamp unto my feet and a light unto my path. And St. Paul, though an angel from heaven preach to you any other gospel, let him be accursed. Galatians 1:8. Other writings, however, of ancient or modern teachers, whatever name they bear, must not be regarded as equal to Holy Scripture. But all of them together be subject to them, and should not be received otherwise or further than as witnesses, which are to show in what manner after the time of the apostles and at what places this pure doctrine of the prophets and apostles was preserved. Now that's the first 2 paragraphs of their statement, and it's dealing with Scripture being the only sole rule and standard for all dogmas, together with any teacher. They are to be esteemed and judged by the Holy Scriptures, the prophetic and apostolic scriptures of the Old and New Testament alone. In other words, Scripture alone is the rule. And it says there might be other teachers and might be other writings, but they cannot be regarded as equal to the Scriptures. And they very much hold this view. Paragraph 2 literally starts talking about the even in the apostles' time there was false teachers and heretics that arose, and symbols, brief and succinct confessions were composed against those heresies, which were regarded as unanimous and universal Christian faith and confessions of the Orthodox and true church, namely the Apostles' Creed, the Nicene Creed, and the Athanasius Creed, and we pledge ourselves to them, and hereby reject all heresies and dogmas contrary to them, and have been introduced to the Church of God. And then it talks about the schism that's going on in their day and the things that they're going to hold to stand against the heresies of their day, and the things that they're going to stand with against the papacy, false worship, idolatry, superstitions, and other sects that were happening at their time was the Asberg's Confession and the apology that went along with it, and the articles that were composed at Salmacid in 1537. Also, the larger and smaller catechisms of Dr. Martin Luther and his work. These things are the things that they're going to stand with against the heresies of their day, but they're all rooted in Scripture. I want to read the next two paragraphs, paragraphs 6 and 7. It says, "To this direction, as above denounced, all doctrines are to be conformed, and what is contrary thereto is to be rejected and condemned, as opposed to the unanimous declaration of our faith." So they're saying, hey, we see Scripture alone as our rule of faith. We see that's what was happening in the early church fathers when the confessions were made against these heresies. And they're putting forward this confession of faith to stand against the heresies of their day. Now, it says, in this way, this is paragraph 7, in this way, the distinction between the Holy Scriptures of the Old and New Testament and all other writings are preserved, and the Holy Scriptures alone remain the only judge, rule, and standard, according to which, as the only teststone to all dogmas, shall and must be discerned and judged as to whether they are good or evil, right or wrong. Now, this is a gigantic statement. They're saying even the statement that they're putting forward to stand against the heresies of their day, the heresies they perceive are going on in their day, all of it, the heresies, even the confession that they're putting forward, they're making a distinction that Holy Scripture is above that. And that when it's all said and done, all of it is going to be laid before Holy Scripture, and Holy Scripture is the only test stone that we're going to judge all of these dogmas, how we're going to discern anything, judge anything, whether it's good or evil, right or wrong, is going to be according to Scripture. Even their confession of faith, the one that they're producing in this formula of Concord, what they're saying is even this book is subject to Holy Scripture. Now, I want to read the last paragraph because it makes a point to talk about other writings. But the other symbols and writings cited are not judges, as are the Holy Scriptures, but only a testimony and a declaration of faith as to how at any time the Holy Scriptures have been understood and explained in the articles in controversy in the Church of God by those then living, and how the opposite dogma was rejected and condemned, by what arguments the dogmas conflicting with the Holy Scriptures were rejected and condemned. What they're saying is, what we're putting forth, this confession, is not on par with Holy Scripture. We're just saying, this is what we see from Holy Scripture. This is the arguments that we're putting forward, and the evidence that we're bringing forward that these other dogmas that are being rejected don't line up with Scripture. The whole first 8 paragraphs are dealing with why we're putting this forward, why we're making these arguments, why we're making this confession. And it's not so that we can have a whole nother rule book. It's so that we can really crystallize what we're for and what we're against, and to present the evidence for those things. It really speaks to the heart of the Reformation, really speaks to the heart of the Protestant faith, at least, where we really hold to Scripture as our final arbiter, our the only real rule of faith and practice is the Holy Scriptures. The church is subject to the Scriptures. Christians are subject to the Scriptures, not the other way around. We can't dictate what we're going to pick and choose from Scripture. We're not going to say one thing this time and something else later on. You know, he's saying, this is what we believe. We're going to hold to this, okay? We're going to see the errors of our day. We're going to speak against them, give the evidence. And that's what they were doing when they were doing this. And for the most part, that's what every denomination is trying to do, is they're trying to put forward what we believe. And conversely, the reality is when you put forward something like this, what it's really saying is we believe Scripture alone is the ultimate authority, not the church. That the church is subject to the Scriptures, and the church cannot then dictate what's authoritative in Scripture, what's not authoritative. They can't change what's authoritative in Scripture. They can't make policies that are not clearly seen in Scripture. And we see that through most of the confessions that we've come to this point. They've all been attempts to stay orthodox. And by orthodox, I don't mean orthodox in the Christian denomination of Orthodox faith. I mean orthodox in that it holds to Scripture. It is canonical. It's something we see in Scripture. It's something either expressly spoken in Scripture or that can be reasonably deduced from Scripture. And we get that from the other great confessions that come shortly after this confession. It's been interesting reading this one. The language really was a little bit more difficult in the way that it was put together, and I like that they didn't change it a whole lot, didn't modernize it, and edit it to oblivion. They kind of left it this way, and I enjoy that. Makes it a little more difficult to read. And I was kind of worried about reading it to you. But this has been an incredible little dive into what they believe, what Lutherans believe about the Scriptures. And in part, at least, most of us Protestants owe the where we are and our view of Scripture to the Lutheran Church and their understanding that Scripture alone is our rule of faith. Now, is it, in my opinion, missing a few things? Maybe, in that it doesn't address inerrancy and infallibility or anything like that. But that wasn't the dogma that they were fighting at the time. And I think they were fighting a different animal, so they had a different focus. And that was the purpose of putting forth the Book of Concord in the first place. Anyway, that's all I have this time. I think I'm going now. I said yesterday what I was going to do, and then it changed, okay? So don't hold me to this, but tomorrow I think I'm going to try to look at the Catholic view of the Scriptures. I'm going to try to be very balanced in doing so and understand it from their vantage point. But anyway, God bless you, friends. We'll see you next time.